to the Honeystead podcast. My name is Kaylee, and I'm a beekeeper, herbalist, and a modern-day homesteader trying to shine a little light of encouragement for others to not be afraid, to get their hands dirty, and of course, learn something old. I want to tell you guys a little bit more about my history. You guys see that I bring the camera with me, and if you aren't familiar with who I am, my name is Kaylee, and I am a homesteader. I share my story on YouTube as well as Instagram and Facebook page, and I also do some blogs, some writing. I'm going to kick back up into that this year. That is my goal. But I share a lot of our story. I share a lot of what is happening right now. And that's something that I do realize I need to start kind of putting a pause on what I'm sharing, because there's so many people that they start watching and they realize that what I have, they don't necessarily see the work that went on prior and how I was able to get to where I am and why. That's the story. You know, why do I do this? Why do I live this lifestyle? And that was the biggest question that I always received a long time ago when I started living a homesteading life. They would always ask me, you know, how do I do all this? How do I grow food? How do I raise my family? I've got 2 kids at home. They're now teenagers, but in the beginning they were babies when we started homesteading. I've got a husband that was in the military. He served 2 terms in Iraq. We were stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas, and moved back here to Virginia right after he was done. I think that is where we started. When my husband got out of the military, we bought our very first house up in the mountains here in Virginia, and I loved it. You know, it was peaceful, it was quiet. I grew up in the mountains, so did my husband. We have a whole backstory, and maybe we'll save that podcast for another day. But we started our story wanting to do something a little different with our kids. You know, I grew up feral. I joke about that all the time. I grew up in the mountains in Linden, Virginia, climbing pawpaw trees to be able to gather fruit. I would come back, my mouth would be stained with blackberries because I'm me picking blackberries. I was that kid. You know, I was always outside. I barely watched TV. My favorite things to do, I had a Tonka truck, I had dinosaurs, I would flip over rocks to find worms to go fishing. I mean, that was my childhood. I was absolutely feral. It's always been a little bit of an internal joke between my husband and I, being that he was military and I'm kind of this free-spirited hippie that, you know, loves mushrooms and bugs, and I'm just kind of that wild one. But we joke in a way because I'm kind of the art to his survival. So together we make this weird combination, but we're totally opposite, but we have the same vision. And then you throw 2 kids into it, and that just brings a whole nother dynamic. And then fast forward to this day where now we have a larger homestead, which we'll get into that, but now we have a multi-generational homestead here. But I had to start with where we came from, because I know a lot of people see my life, our life, what we're doing, and they didn't see the beginning. They didn't see the struggles. They didn't see the lessons that we've learned. They didn't see some of the hard stories, the hard truth of what it took for us to get where we are at. And that's kind of where I want to touch base. That's where I want to start. I want to start this podcast there. I want you guys to be able to get to know me more on a personal level, so that you guys will see that I'm really not much different than many of you who had a dream and had a vision, and I'm pushing forward. And every day I have a dream, and every day I have a vision, and I'm going to continue to push forward. Will I ever be, you know, to the point where I'm like, okay, I've finally accomplished this? No, that's not me. I will always probably have something that I want to do, because isn't that what is so beautiful about living and life, is the fact that you can continue to grow. No matter how grown you are, you will always grow and you will always learn. And that zest for life, that's what I want you guys to experience. I want you guys to have that. And I hope that this podcast, my story, is going to help get you to look back at where you came from. Now, when my babies were little, we would take them fishing, we would take them mushroom hunting. We were all over the place. And a couple of years into that, when they started getting older, my husband came home with our first box of baby chicks. And of course, that's the gateway, the gateway animal. That's what gets you to then turn into a whole farm, which I know that it's a joke, but in all honesty, that's exactly what happened to us. He came home with a few baby chickens and just two little ducklings. One of them was Mabel and one of them was Lala. And we started our homestead up on the mountain. The first things that I planted were asparagus roots because I planned on being there for a little while. We had our chickens growing, and then we got into meat rabbits. I actually purchased our first breeding pair from my beautiful friend Amy Fuel. She's got a lovely homestead, and she's the founder of the Homesteaders of America. She also has a podcast called Choosing Simple with Amy Fuel. You should definitely go check her out. She has got a lot of information out there. We got into meat rabbits and started to raise our own meat along with hunting that my husband would do. And of course, whatever I was growing in the garden. It was a very simple, sweet garden, but it was my first garden. I made all of my trellises out of tree branches that I used zip ties and twine. And I think I have a picture somewhere, but at that time I wasn't documenting. I was too busy. I had babies. I was growing food. I was working. I was going to school, and I was a wife. But just starting with the chickens and then turning into the rabbits, my husband and I started to realize how much we really enjoyed the self-sufficient idea. We enjoyed the idea of being able to raise our own and just not have to be as dependent as we were, going to the grocery store and purchasing things and not knowing exactly what we were getting. And that's a whole nother story, but this is our story. So I'm going to get back to it. So then we got pigs. I adored pigs. I absolutely loved them. We had two piglets that we were raising up with a few of our neighbors. And long story short, the piglets got out. They were actually big pigs at that time. And we were facing a situation that could have gotten us quite in trouble for having pigs. In all honesty, our HOA said no, they were going to slap us all with some fines. I think at that moment, my husband and I both realized that when somebody is trying to restrict us of our dreams, that was when it was time for us to change our dreams. He and I are both very similar to, if you want something done, you need to do it. You need to get up and you need to make a change. I think that's a hard lesson that a lot of people don't realize, is that if they don't like something, a lot of times they don't change anything. And so that kind of leads me to where we are to this day. My husband, God love him, he's an amazing man. And I know many of you, if you watch my YouTube channel, you might see him putting around on the tractor or the skid steer, helping me out. He's not exactly the face of my YouTube channel, but he's very much present, and he is my behind the scenes cheerleader to everything that we're doing. And I don't know exactly if you'll ever see him or hear him start talking on any of my YouTube videos. We'll see. I'm working on him. So that kind of leads me to where we are right now. I was working as a surgical tech in school to become a surgical FA, which is a first assist. I was logging surgeries. I was a mother. I mean, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I did it. But my husband sent me a Zillow link to the house that we live in now with a text message that said, hey, I reached out to our real estate agent and I already did the paperwork. We're already approved. Let's go look at this house. And I'm like, what? I knew we had kind of talked about it, but I didn't realize, that it was going to be that, just a snapping of the fingers, like, boom, we are here. And so we met up with a real estate agent and came here. I think we maybe spent a total of 5 minutes inside the house. In all honesty, the house was not what sold me. It was the property. I knew that anything inside the house we could fix. If we needed to do some new painting, new flooring, bathrooms, that was not my top priority. It had a kitchen, it had bathrooms, everything was working. Perfect. I'm fine with that. We've been here now for 8 years, going on 8 years, and we're making little changes as we go, but I still have kids. So you guys know that, you're not going to really do a whole home remodel when you still have kids. We're going to wait. I'm fine with that. But then we went down and went for the walk, and we hit the trails. There's so many trails on this property. There's a creek that hit our check mark. I had to have some source of water on this property. And as my husband and I were walking down with our kids, all of a sudden, a blue heron, a crane, the bird, just took off in flight. And my husband and I both looked at each other and we're like, this is it. This is it. It had everything that we want. The topography of the land is very unique. We've got pine, then we have pasture, then we have a lot of cherry, and then it kind of steeps down. We've got the creek, and then we have another pasture, and then we've got the mountainside. The mountainside is full of oak and walnut, but there's it's such a interesting lay of the land here, and there's trails all over the place. I think that was it. We both looked at each other and we're like, we're buying this. This is it. And so not much longer after that, we were moving in. And that was when the story really started. There was no structure outside for any animals. We didn't have any fencing. We didn't have any electrical or water lines ran to the pastures. So that was, we took a dive in and we just started. We knew how much we wanted to actually start being more in control and having that ability to be self-sufficient and grow our own food and raise our children right here in the thick of it. And there's definitely a lot of regret that I didn't start documenting right away. It actually took me a couple of years into this place that I actually felt like, oh, maybe I should start sharing what I'm doing outside of pictures and just sharing with friends. But I realized that we actually had a story there. And so I do regret not sharing, but that's okay. There's definitely a lot more to share in the future. We started fencing in our pastures and planning out our garden plot, planning out where to put the bees, planning all the things. And I look back over the last couple of years and I'm still blown away at everything that we've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. But it's because we're doers and we want to see a project through. We love doing projects. And it still blows my mind to see how much that we've actually accomplished in the short period of time, really, that we've been here. Probably about our second year here, when I had started the garden, I was working with my babies at the time, and Carson, my oldest child, he looked up at me, and I was teaching him how to plant. I was teaching him how to plant in the garden. And he looked up and he said, "Mommy, we're learning something that's old." And that just kind of stuck with me. That's exactly what we were doing. We were learning traditions that I had learned. I was teaching him traditions that I had learned as a child, whether foraging or whatnot. I didn't have too much farming history outside of being around cattle and horses and bees, but I didn't have the garden aspect. I knew a little bit, but not anywhere near what I know now and what I still continue to learn. But it made me smile because it really, that right there, the learning something old, made me sit back and look and think. And that's really what I want to cherish, is all the traditions, all the years. Could you imagine the amount of people, the history, especially with herbal medicine? Could you imagine the plants and how people learned? This isn't learning something new. This is absolutely learning something old. We are learning traditions and we are sharing traditions, and I'm teaching traditions that I learned as a child and that I'm still continuing to learn. I don't ever want to stop learning, whether it's herbal medicine or with livestock or with gardening or with foraging. I want to continue to learn. I am so thirsty for this type of knowledge. I do believe that God has put me here for a reason, and I'm honored that I get to take everybody with me. I know that there's a lot of people that are just so afraid to start because starting something new is hard. Starting something new is intimidating. What if you fail? Well, what if you fail? Do you know how many times I've failed? Sometimes when you experience days that could just knock you to your knees and you just want to hit a reset button. But in homesteading and in life, you can't necessarily hit a reset button. You do have to face the things and learn how to overcome and adapt. I have lost livestock. I have lost gardens. I lost an entire high tunnel of tomatoes to hornworms this past year. Yeah, that still hurt. I've lost bees. Yeah, that's always hard. But what I don't want people to do is to not try because of a fear of loss. One of the biggest lessons that I've been able to gather and to help with words of encouragement for you is to just remember that sometimes those bad days that happen on the homestead will just make the other days that are actually really, really good, will make you pause and appreciate them. And I truly hope that this will actually give you the encouragement to know that, yeah, you're going to experience the days on your homestead that might not be that great, but you're going to experience many, many more that are actually really, really awesome. You just need to find it. You just need to take a breath and take a pause and sit and look and appreciate the good that is around. I hope that you guys enjoyed the very first podcast, and I do have many more stories to share. This was just a little bit of a backstory to where we came from, why we started, and also to give you guys a little bit of encouragement to know that you guys are capable of this. I know you are. Whatever it may be, whether it's beekeeping, starting a garden, getting into herbal medicine, raising your first animals for livestock, whether it's chickens or pigs or quail or rabbits, and in the end, it'll make for one heck of a story. Thank you guys for listening to the Honeystead's very first podcast, and as always, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and learn something old. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.